We're talking about architectural journalism tonight, and there's obviously the old truism in journalism that one picture is worth 1,000 words, and I suppose what we're investigating is really whether you need the words or not. I guess the answer is yes, but in what format? We've got some great speakers, and I will introduce them in a little while, but what we're starting with is that Vanessa Brown from BDP has marvellously surveyed architects and other professionals, I think, in one of the country's largest architectural practices. So she is going to reveal to us what they've actually discovered from their research. And then I will introduce our panelists. They'll all give a little presentation, and then the idea is that we should have a discussion. So Vanessa.
Okay, thanks, Ruth. Hello everyone, I'm Vanessa Brown, Head of Communications at BDP. The title slide is, the advert is a bit controversial. It's not really what we're talking about tonight, but I'll show you why. To grab people's attention, we created the advert, Is Print Media Dead?, just to try and grab people so they would fill in our survey online. This is Planet, which is our intranet from across the whole practice. The title of the survey was, In the Image-Obsessed World of Architecture, Is There Still a Place for the Written Word? So when people clicked on that front page advert, they were taken to this page and encouraged to fill in a very short survey. So this is an overview in percentages of our responses. As Ruth said, not just architects, we've got all sorts of professions at BDP, but the graph is quite representative of who we are, and the majority is architects, and it was quite an architecturally led survey. This is also an overview of the offices that answered, which is, again, is quite representative of where our studios are. Interestingly, Sheffield isn't our second largest studio, Manchester is. And I don't know if it's got anything to do with it, but our information services person, who's our librarian, is based in Sheffield. And she's constantly making sure everyone's reading the magazines and sending links around, so I don't know if that's got anything to do with it. Okay, so I'll just quickly run through the questions and a few of the answers, which I collated last night. So, question 1. Which of these sources do you use to access up-to-date information about architecture and design? And as you can see, people answered print and online the same amount. They could choose as many as were relevant. Worryingly, 75 people said other architectural websites. So I really hope that doesn't mean other architects' websites that they were looking for inspiration. 27.27% architectural blogs, and nearly 42% for non-architectural websites and blogs. Question 2. Now, I was a bit cheeky. When Ruth gave me suggestions of questions, I wanted to know what people were their favourite publications. But as Michael pointed out, in my question I did say publications, which kind of excludes online media. But here's a snapshot of what people's favourites were: AJ, BD, AR, Weber Journal, as you would expect. Question 3, which single source do you consider the most important? So I thought this answer was quite interesting. 51% printed and 29% online, when considering 70% equally said they read printed and online versions. Question 4, what are you looking for in terms of professional information? Nice to see that 82% are looking for intellectual stimulus and new ideas, 76% inspiration. Another top one is news about project wins and practice moves. That's the top one at 73%. One of the lowest is gossip, 16%. Interestingly, 64% looking for technical and legal information, so not just lovely, exciting images. And a few people made some additional comments that they're looking for industry trends, sustainability, and they like to look at the photography. Question 5, do you make significant use of the following sites for professional services? And this is a social media question. The majority is 77% people use LinkedIn Professional, and the others are quite low, which I was quite surprised about. Question 6. If you find something really relevant and interesting, how long would you be willing to spend reading a single item or watching a single video? And the majority there is within the 5 to 15 minute. And then last question was estimate how many design or profession books you read or use in a year. And 46% said 1 to 5. Okay, and that concludes a very short survey. So over to you.
We've recently redesigned and relaunched the RIBA Journal, and before we did that, we did a lot of reader research, the whole, focus groups, online surveys, telephone surveys, face-to-face, this, that, and the other. And in answer to the question about the written word first, we were interested in this because, we're all writers, and we like writing. And the impression we got back from a lot of people was it was too much writing. They wanted less writing and more lovely pictures, and especially more lovely drawings, actually, amongst everything else. We can choose to perhaps ignore that, particularly in our next issue, because the other aspect of such surveys is who are you asking? There's a great hunger for long-form writing amongst the rising generation of architects. It may just be a simple reflection of how much work they've got on, to be honest, because we found that busy practitioners were the ones who said, sorry, we've got no time to read long articles, we just want to sort of skim. That's to be borne in mind. The other thing is, yes, the point about print. No, print is by no means dead. As our research has proved and our actual conversations with readers has proved. Now, we're a different case, I think, from some of the others here because we're a membership magazine. Now, I don't know about you, but if I'm a member of an organization and I pay to be a member of an organization, I want to get something physical in the post to prove that they value me. And so therefore, it came as no surprise to us to find that, in fact, in our case, in our own research, it was something like 65% of the 1,500 or so people we talked to prefer print for any professional magazine, actually. But when it came to our own magazine, the RIBA Journal, 77% preferred that to be in print. In other words, they're not going to be fobbed off with a link to a website, frankly, or even a digital edition, which was something of a blow to us because we spend such a lot of money sending out the magazine, particularly to members based overseas, in China, Brazil, India, and so forth. And that's very expensive. We were rather hoping we might be able to sort of go digital for them, but no, in fact, the international members, even more than UK-based members, really want a print magazine. So we're stuck with our postage costs, I'm afraid, on that one. And interestingly, in our survey, absolutely nobody, and I do mean nobody, wanted online only. Yes, they want to see a good online presence as well, as your research has shown, but nobody wanted online only. So, print is by no means dead. If anything, I think it's reviving. Just look at the whole business of new launches of magazines happening all the time, particularly at the high end, particularly men's design magazines, fashion magazines, and so forth. No way is print dead. When we came to, therefore, reinventing our own print product, and the online product will follow, it was very much about that business of the physical object. And so, to cut a very long story short, and long story started in about January this year with the research. Then we developed our own content strategy, what we wanted to do, what came out of the research as well, fed into all of that. And then we interviewed about half a dozen designers, chose one. We chose very well, as it turned out. Of course, we selected Matt Willey, excellent designer. And so what we moved from was the old RIBA Journal, which effectively looked like this. It's, if you like, it was fine for its day, but it's very much a kind of trade professional magazine kind of look, to, as from September, this, with matte finished paper, a bulkier object, slightly wider format, as you can see obviously a graphics-led cover rather than what is the industry standard, I suppose, in a sense, amongst magazines, which is you slap a picture of a building on the cover. And our designer was very clear on the fact that it's, even as he has done, working for the New York Times magazine, he says, it's actually relatively rare that you get an image which is so strong, a photograph that is so strong that it can carry a cover on its own. Even less so is that the case in professional magazines. And so therefore, we came up with something which really goes back to the magazines of a very rich and fertile period from the mid-60s to the early 70s. And there's also just a hint of Blue Note jazz record sleeves in this, by the way, where you get the spot color, the one color cover, you get a graphic image, you get something which looks the same while sort of moderating slightly issue by issue. So in a sense, you build up a set over the course of a year. And there are various other ways in the design which we can do. We can have a full bleed cover and so forth. And all I can say about this is that thus far it's had a remarkable degree of acceptance amongst what is traditionally a very conservative audience, architects. Architects, for instance, whenever, and it happens about every 20 years or 25 years on average, they refresh the RIBA crest, the two lions and the stick which they lean against. There's always howls of anguish from the membership about changing the crest. So we were expecting similar howls of anguish when we did a radical redesign of the journal. The howls did not come. It was about, to be honest, about a 95% enthusiasm response is what we've had. And then 5% black spider letters saying, you know, you have ruined everything I've ever stood for. So we feel that's a bit of a result. So, yep, we know that print is alive and well. I should just add, I suppose, from the consumer side of things, on the Sunday Times and other such newspapers, that, of course, they've been hit very, very hard by the move to digital media. I personally very seldom buy a daily newspaper, but I get an awful lot of my information from the Guardian website, the Times website, which I pay for, etc. Obviously, Times newspapers has gone down that brave route of going behind a paywall and expecting people to pay for their product. Now, this didn't work at first because everybody was used to getting websites free, as to a large extent we still do. And it was looking very bad for them. They weren't getting much of a take-up for that. Until such a time as they developed their iPad app. The iPad was invented basically just about in time to save News International. The iPad app, people are used to paying small amounts of money for an app. Therefore, suddenly it was not unnatural to pay to get a newspaper on your iPad and other tablets and so forth. So since basically tablets took off, the circulation of Times newspapers, paid for circulation, has been steadily rising. And so now you see other newspapers just beginning to follow that lead. And although, as someone who obviously uses the net a lot, appreciates the freedoms of the internet and the freeness of the internet, I know as a journalist, if people don't pay for what you write, you're not going to make a living. Somehow they have to find a way of doing that. And I think some of our other speakers tonight will be able to talk more about that. So that's me. Thank you very much.
Well, firstly, thanks to Vanessa for conducting this report, which is fantastic. It's really, really interesting. So there's lots of issues raised there, and I'm as you said, are probably at the other end from the guys here, in that we are all online. We don't have a paper publication, World Architecture News. Also, an important point just to note is that we're international, and that was one of the reasons why WAN got founded, is because architecture was clearly going international. whereas most of the journals were national. As you know, indeed, the Ariba Journal is tied to an association. But architects were getting out; they were doing projects all around the world, and the digital revolution was happening. So we founded in 2005, and to some extent, we were in the right place at the right time, and have grown very, very quickly. But I would also like to obviously agree totally with you that print is not dead, and it's we'll be the first to concede that, and we personally wouldn't want it to be any other way. But there are a number of interesting points. So what I thought I'd do is just kind of flag up a few areas that I think are interesting, and then maybe you can quiz me in a minute if you think there's something you want to follow through. Looking at the questions and the report here, I mean, a number of interesting things that jump out. I mean, one of them is touched on is the attention span, and I think that's something that we're all aware of. That there is a huge trend here that time is getting compressed. People are much busier than they used to be. People's attention spans have significantly dropped, and Ruth and I were talking about video content earlier on, and we know that we've been producing 20-minute videos and finding that, as you've just shown here, that people don't watch 20-minute videos. 5 minutes is quite sufficient, thank you. So, that we're all on a learning curve, and Hugh mentioned about the survey that they'd carried out on our online publication. We're on a real-time survey. We get so much data coming in from the whole thing is kind of real-time, and that touches on another area that I think is hugely important. We are in a period of transition, and I don't think anybody would kind of argue that whilst print is very much alive and well, I mean there is a huge trend. I mean, we are drifting into digital media in all shapes and sizes, and we're just in that one part of that with World Architecture News. But the big data issue is I think is an area that infringes on everybody. There was a great article in the Standard last week, and it's talking about, and it affects everybody, that there's business leaders are just really suffering from pressure of data. There's the words that we've all used before are information overload, but now we're getting kind of thrown information at us from all different directions, and business leaders and presumably architects too are just struggling to deal with this and to know what information is important, what information isn't important. How on earth do we analyse where we're going, because there's just too much stuff coming in, and it's a really interesting point. Moving through the list of other areas here, as far as images over text, it's definitely something that we've noticed in our publication, that part of what we do is we have an area, it's called News in Pictures, and it's just that, it's a grid. And so rather than putting headlines out to our readers, we're putting out pictures. It is one of the most popular parts of our website. And our audience is probably 95% architects. And that's just a fact. I mean, they absolutely get drawn to that. So that's interesting. But obviously, a picture might tell 1,000 words, but it doesn't actually tell the whole story. And we know ourselves, running the WAN Awards, that architects will immediately get drawn to an image that gets across the judging table, but immediately they see it, there's questions raised, and the pictures don't answer those questions. So you have to resort to the text, and you have to look and find out, well, why was this building designed this way? Why, is it a new building? And also, well, there's a whole load of areas, obviously, but that's quite an important area that I think you'll always need text to go with the pictures. But there is definitely a trend towards more images and grabbing people's attention, as you said, for the covers. And we're always looking for a good image, and I'm sure most people are. The other thing is just to throw the question: do architects need text? The other area that Ruth and I were talking about this morning is, of course, what is an architect? there are older architects and there are younger architects, and that's something that we come across all the time looking at our rival publications, in that clearly younger architects are using media in a different way to older architects. And that's something that then just kind of blows this whole question apart, about printed media, and you need to then subdivide that. And this is where we get back into the data thing. We analyze it and explode it into, it gets really, really complicated. So I think to try and put a kind of a wrapper on this, there is definitely a trend, whether that towards more image-led media, and that goes for video as well as images. It also goes for the huge thing that's happening in Japan is mobile devices. Well, it's happening here too, but Japan led the way in mobile devices and getting information from that. And that's much harder to read on a mobile phone. Images are much easier. So that's kind of linked in with it. But anyway, they're just a few of the points that I kind of picked up from this survey, and be happy to kind of answer questions as we go forward.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And our third speaker is Catherine Slessor, who is editor of the Architectural Review, which has also been doing a lot with longer form journalism. So
yes, we have indeed. Can you all hear me? Good. I think what I'm probably going to echo a lot of what Hugh has said, because we also have been through a relaunch 2 years ago now. But I just wanted to sort of give you a sense of what went on, kind of leading up to that. I'm the editor of the Architectural Review. I'm a journalist who escaped into the much more agreeable world of architectural journalism about 25 years ago. But the AR is much older than that. It started in 1896, and since then it's been on a mission to inform and inspire people about architecture and reconnect architects with their core purpose of transforming human life for the better. We currently have readers in over 100 countries. Most are practicing architects or architecture students. One key aspect of the AR is that it's a journal of record. It forms a unique archive of buildings from around the world, and we find that people cherish and keep their copies. We are always being rung up by widows of dead architects who've got 25 years of ARs in their lofts and they don't know what to do with them. So my role as editor is to choreograph content, connect with the readership, and tactfully cajole this distinguished brand forward into the digital era without compromising its intellectual values or commercial potential. I'm only the 14th editor in its history, and the first, and hopefully not the last, woman to be in the hot seat. So what strikes me is that as the AR is documenting the progress of modern architecture over the decades, it has also evolved in the way that it does that. And it started off with early experiments in photography, and then the latest digital media. And recent technical advances, of course, have made a profound impact on how architecture is presented and discussed. And this new media, of course, brings problems as well as opportunities. Mainly because the internet, when I started in architectural journalism, it was like a Freemasonry. You know, you didn't write on architecture unless you had an architecture degree, unless you were a distinguished critic, unless you had a magazine in which to sort of to do it. Same with architectural photography. It was a highly skilled trade. A very specialized branch of architectural photography. You needed expensive equipment to do it. You needed a craft, you needed training, you needed technical expertise. So it was like being up there on Mount Olympus. People would do this stuff and talk down to the masses about architecture. Now, of course, the internet has democratized this form of Freemasonry and opened it up to a much wider constituency of bloggers, commentators, and what have you. But in this great sort of surge of equality and democratization, it's always had a curiously atomizing effect, in which architecture has become dislocated from its context and purpose, reducing it to a rolling news feed of images. Or, as I sometimes like to imagine it, one of those conveyor belts of sushi you get in Japanese restaurants, where you endlessly graze with all these nice little nibbly things but are never actually fulfilled. And beyond this, the media is not the only thing that's changing. the traditional role and status of architects is also under threat, usurped by project managers, engineers, contractors, and what have you. And architects are slightly under threat or in danger of being reduced to obliging set dressers to politicians, potentates, and carpetbaggers, while the world succumbs to a succession of economic and ecological crises. So, in all this, architectural magazines, in whatever form, digital or paper, I think have to lead discourse and rediscover new relevance, rather than holding up a flattering mirror to the profession. And in this context, the paper or digital words or images debate becomes, in its way, irrelevant. It's the message, rather than the medium, which is truly important. We need critical thinking for critical times. And the challenge for editors is to be propositional rather than reactive, as well as being able to cultivate a fertile reciprocity between different media. As you may know, the AR has undergone a comprehensive editorial relaunch, and this was intended to deliver a more thoughtful and stimulating array of subject matter in a compelling new graphic format, both in print and, to a lesser extent, online. Responding to the current challenges, both globally and to the profession, the relaunched AR aims to be relevant, engaging, and expansive, and full of words. In all this, words are crucial. The design was expressly conceived so that we could accommodate longer articles. We had a very ill-fated flirtation with a previous redesign that seemed to favour shorter articles and a sort of dumbing down approach to the whole issue of architectural coverage. We can now publish articles 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 words, and there seems to be, as Hugh notes, an appetite for that, and that's been very successful. So I think paper is still the best medium to show that. You can't read 3,000 words online. So just to say that it's not a cosmetic makeover, but it's more of a considered comprehensive editorial relaunch. In a media climate increasingly enthralled to the shallow and superficial, we think there's a desperate need for renewed and serious engagement with architecture and the issues that affect it. And our experience shows that people get it and like it. We did a survey earlier this year. We're thinking of trying to roll out some digital products. We did a survey with our readers to say what they would like to see. And rather refreshingly, we got back, most people said, well, actually, we like the paper magazine. You don't need to do anything. If you just keep doing that, that's great. We don't want to see an iPad version of the magazine. If you want to do things with new media, try and make them as imaginative as the paper magazine. So that's a tough call, because we have to then really think about what we want to do rather than just, following the herd. So we're encouraged by that. And from this, we think it's clear that a monthly magazine is still an important discursive platform with a crucial role to play in disseminating the shifting dynamic between architecture and society. And despite the distracting conveyor belt of sushi, words still matter very much. Thank you.
I'm the last person to need that because I'm mic'd up, but you can share it. That's really interesting, and I think the point Kathy made, that one no longer stood on high and dictated things to people, should also relate to this evening, in that actually now you can ask questions, discuss amongst yourselves, but out loud, make points or whatever. I know what's going to happen is that absolutely nobody's going to put their hand up and it's going to be completely silent, and then after a while people will start. So, but somebody already wants to, and you've got a mic. There we are.
I was interested, Catherine, you say about the change in attitude towards architectural journalism, but how threatened do you feel by, me personally, I think one of the biggest fears I have in terms of the digital age and as a PR agency, we very much, push the idea of blogs to clients. I think they have their place. But my concern is that there is a threat to journalism in terms with as the digital age comes up. And to me, the worst thing possible is it'll get to a point where when you're looking for, some credible information, there's not going to be any magazines there that, are filtered, but instead we're going to have 800 blogs about something. So I just wondered what your view as to how threatened you think journalism is by sort of raising technology, really.
We've got another mic coming. We've got our own mic, but it's not pretty and orange, I'm afraid. Yes.
I don't think we are threatened by blogs because I think the people that write for us, they're specialists, they're academics, they're critics. They're not bloggers. I mean, I think it's nice to. I think there's room for both. I don't think you need to sort of necessarily, I think the internet has opened things up in a good way as well as a kind of slightly challenging way. There's room for. 20 years ago, nobody cared what anybody thought about architecture, if you weren't a sort of an architectural critic. Now you can post something online, you can talk about it, and that's, I think, opened up debate and discussion in a very healthy and lively way. And it has, as I said, it's sort of shattered this kind of Freemasonry of people talking down to you from on high. But I think people still want what I would describe as a curated product. They want to engage with the magazine that, that they know that things have been selected, edited, written by people kind of who know who know what they're doing. So I think there's room for both. You can sort of switch between the two. And I think people are doing that. They're sort of cherry picking the best of both. It's a both and rather than an either or. So I think we don't necessarily feel threatened by that at the moment. And we'd like, I think what sort of, we're trying. It would be, where are the next generation of architectural journalists coming from? That's what I would like to ask, because. And I think they will come out of the internet. They will come out of bloggers. So that's quite healthy, and that's kind of sustaining the craft and the profession, and in a way that I think is really encouraging.
Anyone up here want to say anything else?
I want to add something to that, actually, which came out of the BDP research I was looking at today, where yes, equal prominence is given to the sources people use, printed magazines or online versions of print magazines, both the same. But when you turn to the findings about which single source do you consider the most important, printed magazines come pretty much twice as high as online versions. So in a weird way, and I didn't quite understand this, well, I can sort of see why, but it's logically wrong, because writing is just writing. And if someone presents online as opposed to in print, it shouldn't make any difference. And yet somehow people still seem to think that it counts for more if it's in print. It must be more important if it's in print. I find that interesting. I think that will change over time. Where's the next generation of architectural critics coming from? Well, I know, some who have emerged from the blogosphere and are now, people like Owen Hatherley. They emerged from doing blogs online and are now writing in The Guardian and every other magazine and writing books and all the rest of it. So I think that the quality of writing will always emerge. Obviously, there's a massive field out there to pick from. I think quality does rise to the top, and when quality does rise to the top, then people like me and Kathy are, and all of us actually here, are probably going to be commissioning those people. So I don't see a problem there at all, because if you're a good critic, you're a good critic. It doesn't matter what your medium is.
Yeah, I think it's a very, very good point there. And again, I think I'd like to reinforce what Kathy said, is that there is room for both printed media, and we wouldn't, as World Architecture News, I mean, our name, as it says, is we publish news, and so if there's a new project that's just been launched just been finished in China or something, we'll aim to get that information out to our readership as soon as we can, with key facts and with all the important images that everyone wants to see. This isn't a detailed building critique. It's not what we do. So, architects do want to keep abreast of what's going on. So there's certainly room for both, I think.
Anyone else want to join in?
Yes, I was going to say about the printed editions, why I think people love them is because they're physical, beautiful objects. I know that I keep my ARs in my downstairs toilet that I probably steal from BDP. As a comms team, we get every magazine going, and we have piles and piles and piles of them. And then every now and again, we have a clear out and do an email around the office who wants to pick up some spare copies of the AJ and the Reba Journal, and people go wild for them and rip them and take them home, and then leave big piles of kind of the more pamphlet-y magazines there. They don't want them. So that's why I think people prefer the printed. When they're given that question, do you like what's more important, printed or online? They like the physical object.
Obviously, there's a huge difference between daily, weekly, and monthly here. And this is why the daily newspapers are suffering so badly, because obviously we can get our news from anywhere instantly, anytime we want it. So why would one buy a paper newspaper? It's becoming increasingly irrelevant. Strangely, I buy the Times on Saturday only because of the jumbo crossword. It's ridiculous. One should buy a book of crosswords. It'd be a lot cheaper. But there's something about the particular ceremony of the jumbo crossword in the Times on Saturday. I wouldn't buy it for any other reason. And odd things like this do apply. I think that in our sector at the moment, the magazines which are feeling the pressure are the weeklies. They're commercially under a great deal of pressure at the moment. The monthlies, however, because it's a more discursive thing, it's not news-based, the monthlies seem to have an existence all of their own, which is not particularly threatened by the online phenomenon, because they exist very happily alongside each other. And you know, both Kathy and I, of course, have our online presences as well, but we know that our readers still prefer print. We provide both, but we know which they value more, and that's where it goes. It's a question of frequency.
I got my own mic, thank you. I was very interested in what you said about much younger readers being the ones who are really keen to have long-form journalism. I mean, which seems to kind of go against the kind of instinct of...
They've got more time to read.
Okay, that's great.
Another matter which was raised was the question of, when it comes to digital media, is it a young person's thing? The answer our research provided to that was that it was a young person's thing, because they're the early adopters. But now it's pretty much flattened out, and the silver surfers are there in some force. So actually it's pretty much across the generations now.
Oh, great.
Hello, thanks. I was just going to say, there was a point you made that we're all swamped now with so much data. And for me, personally, the print, you know, I'd rather get my AR in the hard copy for the very fact that it stands out from the stuff that we receive, because it physically arrives in a different format and it gets my attention, rather than I have to decide to go online to go and view it. I said, be, you know, whichever publication it was. And also, like as Vanessa was saying, you know, apart from the sheer aesthetic beauty of having it, it's like the album cover thing. You know, since CDs came along, we don't have that enjoyment of engaging with the actual product itself. And you know, when I was a student, or you know, when I was an architect, you'd think, oh yes, I need to see the AR with a picture of whatever on the front. You know, I don't get that with a digital version, that I have to firstly make a choice about going to look at. Secondly, I have to find my way through it. For me, I mean, I'm just a grumpy old git. You know, I qualified, you know, years and years ago. So I'm not even I'm not even caught up with the silver surfers yet. But you know, being old school, I just find that I'm used to what I'm used to, and anything that takes me more than 2 clicks to get anywhere just loses my attention. If it's there and I can skim it and flick it, it's just so much more immediate, whether it's a pencil or you know, so you can actually engage with it a lot more quickly and actually physically remember, you know, layouts of pages, and you know, the iconic photographs that we've all been brought up on have come from magazines. I don't get that sense now. If I've got an iPad or a computer, I've got to look at something, I've got to zoom in on it, it doesn't get me in a way that you turn a page and you can show somebody that's it, you know. So for me, you know, for the personal level, it won't go out. It won't go out because it's just another way of conveying the information. So I don't think it'll ever be replaced. I just think it will always still be there in the way and being used for its own convenience. And if people, you know, and digital media will be there for its convenience.
This is great. This is turning into a bit of a love-in, but I mean, you know, I can understand what you're saying, because this is the premise on which we sort of based our relaunch. But it's interesting that both Hugh and I, for our relaunches, we both taken a decision to improve the object quality of the product, use different paper stocks, make it a more cherishable thing. And I think that art and architecture magazines will probably be the last to kind of succumb to the, the digital tide, because we offer something that you can't, the tactility, the object quality that you cannot get, you can't get on the internet. But I mean, to get back to the idea of, I still buy a daily newspaper, which is, a bit odd, I think, in this day and age. When I'm on the tube reading a newspaper, I think I'm the only person on the tube reading a newspaper. But the dailies and the weeklies are, as you said, under huge pressure to go completely digital. So I think the world in the end will be polarized between beautiful magazines and whizzy internet.
And it's interesting, isn't it, that, Hugh talked about this, and I know that you also looked back, when you redesigned, you looked back to the history of the AR and sort of tried to bring back some of the things that you felt were best. And on the other hand, actually, when you look at things online, there's not a tremendous amount of innovation, is there, in terms of how images and things are used. In a magazine, you can print them very beautifully. Online, well, you have the odd sort of walk around and things, but you don't have that much. I kind of remember about a year ago somebody produced a photograph of a whale which was so detailed that you could go in and look life-size at kind of any of its skin. And it's almost as if I'm wondering where the innovation is coming from. It's interesting that magazines are being very successful by looking back. Websites still don't seem to be really doing anything that's very, very different from kind of print on the web, apart from obviously the immediacy and being able to do it terribly fast.
Thanks. Yeah, there are innovations.
Oh, and the videos that no one watches.
Yes, the videos. No, there are innovations, and it is partly addressing the big data thing. Is that we're doing a lot of work at the moment in looking into personalising what you see. So it'll recognise what the projects that you like and have seen, and that you will get tailored information. That's going to be a huge step forward. But I'd just like to follow through on the question about the keeping the archive of printed magazines, which is something that I do, and I value printed magazines too. But what we like to think that we offer is that everything we publish, and we've got thousands and thousands of news stories out there. They're all there. They're all free, and they are generally 2 clicks away. So if you want to research that museum in Warsaw, you can just do click, and there's all the information on that building. Whereas you might not be able to remember where the AJ was that had featured that's in a great pile, and you're in a hurry and you actually need to find it because you're trying to do something. That's where we like to think we do offer something, and it's free.
We'll go back to Kathy, and then I know there's someone who's itching to ask a question. So
Yeah.
we'll ask back.
I think that's where the internet obviously scores hugely over magazines, to be able to locate and recover stuff that you want to find out. But we have our next great thrust, and our kind of 5-year plan is to digitize the whole of the 117 years of the AR, so that with a searchable database, so that you can pull up the original articles. So that once we do that, I think that would be, no more widows with 25 years of paper copies. It'll be there online for people to access.
There was a question back there, wasn't there?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm itching, but I certainly was going to raise a question. I'm a little bit confused, actually, because I'm not sure I see either of these two media as being in competition. If you actually think of the psyche of the architects tend to look at something, and then the first question they ask is why. So immediately you want to get into more depth. And I think that's really one of the big drivers for the hard copy, is because it's clearly demonstrated that in hard copy there's a much higher quality of intellect and in-depth analysis of what the issue is that's being debated. And I think it was interesting in the BDB survey, for example, detail, is in the top 3 or 4 items, I think, and that is all about the detail. And invariably, architects need to get into that level of detail just to deliver and do what they do.
It's quite interesting, isn't it, as well, in that BDP survey, that, not surprisingly, when you ask people about social media, LinkedIn came right at the top. I don't know if that means everyone at BDP is looking for a job, but... Right. But anyway, but actually what's interesting is that I think, 33% or something said they were looking for, they were using Twitter professionally, and only a tiny number were using Pinterest. Now, Twitter might be very short, but it's mostly to do with words. I know you can link to images and websites, but actually, and you know, Pinterest is the sort of porn of just collecting things that you love. And I was quite interested to see that that was so small, because, you know, given that architects love making mood boards and things like that, I don't know what the panel think about it.
We found Twitter to be invaluable because it gives us a direct dialogue with our readers, which otherwise, previously, we didn't have in quite the same way. Also, of course, it's a different readership because we've got about 25,000 followers on Twitter, and I think our circulation is 27,500. But I'm prepared to bet that there's not as huge an overlap as you might imagine between those two constituencies. In other words, there's a whole world of people who are interested in architecture out there who wouldn't necessarily get the journal because they're not a member, etc. And we get instant reactions that way, and you can very quickly sense the mood of the architectural design community, of what they think about, you know, Zaha's design for a super yacht, or whatever it may happen to be. So that we have found incredibly useful. We also do, Facebook is fading away really. Used to be much more important than it is now. Pinterest, I think we do it. It doesn't seem to be very popular. Instagram, however, we use a lot. And Instagram, again, it's a dialogue between us and our readers. You can do a simple thing, like when the Shard was being completed, we just said to all our readers, show us your Shard, give us your pictures of the Shard. And we had thousands. And then we said, we will select the best of the pictures you send us. And we did, and people were astonishingly grateful that we had selected their pictures of the Shard. So I think that those are very, very useful means of dialogue between you and your constituency and your wider constituency, and that works very well indeed. Pinterest I have yet to sort of get to grips with personally. Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, yes, I do that personally, but Pinterest haven't quite come to that yet myself. But the magazine, I think, has tried and found it not that useful.
Okay, Kathy. And then when we finish this little round, I think we'll see if there's anybody else who's got anything they want to say, and if they do, great, and if not, we can have another drink, can't we?
Well, I've got a terrible confession to make in that I do not tweet. The AR tweets, and we have a 24-year-old assistant editor who tweets on behalf of the AR, which I think is perhaps at the moment how we want to play it. But it's a kind of corporate Twitter because they just kind of, you know, I think what Hugh's talking about is trying to sort of, you know, gauge the mood and engage with your readers, which is something we kind of do, but it's on a very kind of superficial basis. I think if I did it personally, if we all did it personally, I think it would be more useful, but it's just having the bloody time to do it. You know, we're just doing so much stuff. So I'm sort of standing a bit on my Mount Olympus at the moment, kind of watching this sort of swirl of stuff going on. Maybe I'll jump in next year. But we do have, we've got a folio blog on Tumblr, which our 24-year-old assistant editor started, and it's just drawings posting, and there's an insane appetite for drawings. We've got 90,000 people posting drawings. So we just haven't got quite to grips with it yet, but that's perhaps for the future.
Anyone else want to say anything? Or? Yes, right at the front.
Hugh, you said something really interesting about the ritual of reading the paper and you know, that being part of your daily routine, and the same being the same for architecture magazines. I mean, with the growing use of iPad editions and iPads and apps and, you know, online media, do you think that, you know, maybe 5-10 years down the line that this question is going to be readdressed in with a whole new audience?
Whoever it was, yes, Yusa, who said back there that it's not an either or. and increasingly this is not the case. The print supports the online and vice versa. You get this bundle of different ways of looking at the same thing, if you like, and that's what's developing. So I don't think that in 5 years that will be any different. I just think it'll be a bit cleverer, perhaps, in ways which we haven't quite considered. All I do know is that, yes, the ritualistic aspects of it are important, not just for architects, but for all of us. I mean, I read novels on Kindle. I download 19th century and Edwardian novels on Kindle to read those. And you do miss something of that physical aspect of the flicking through the pages, the turning over the pages and so forth. It's information presented even in that facsimile way. And for the same reason I don't like those page-turner digital, we've got one of our own, I don't like those page-turner digital magazines which pretend they're paper really and make a slight rustling noise when you turn them over. It struck me that the whole point about the internet was not that skeuomorphic thing. It should be something, in a sense, as World Architecture News is. It is of itself. It's not pretending to be a book. It's not pretending to be a magazine. Dezeen is not pretending to be a magazine. It's pretending to be, something else. So I think that's the difference. That there is that new development of media, which, like World Architecture News, like Dezeen, starts online. Interestingly, I see that Dezeen is now actually descending into print.
Yes, it's interesting.
Here and there.
Print on demand.
Print on demand, and also they've done a book and so forth. I don't know whether you're thinking of doing any of this yourself, but intertwining strands, I think the two just work together more and more closely.
And I think the interesting thing when you talk about your books on your Kindle is the other thing is, and maybe it would be more if you were reading more contemporary novels, but you can't share, you can't lend very easily, and I think that's the other thing with magazines, is that you can say, come over here, have a look at this, and you can obviously show something on your iPad to somebody, but actually that thing about sharing still happens best, doesn't it, with
I'd like to sort of jump in and just say, as regards to newspapers, something that I think often gets overlooked, in that we often, people talk about the tactile thing of holding the newspaper in your hand. I mean, personally, I love newspapers. We get loads of newspapers. We devour them as a family. But what I think that what gets missed is, I think one of the strongest things going for a newspaper, and I'm using Kathy's word now, I mean, they're curated. Somebody has spent time finding information that we think will be interesting. So online, you might you'll search for a specific thing, whereas with a newspaper, you'll look at the headline, but within the same spread of paper, there will be lots of other things grabbing your attention, and there might be some stories there that are really interesting that you wouldn't have gone to look for online. And I think that's to me where you get the true value of the curation that an organisation has put together, a bunch of information that you'll find useful.
Well, that's what I found a bit worrying when you said that the future was you being able to tailor your content. Because I think, oh my God, if for some reason I spend the next 3 weeks looking at hospitals in the Middle East, I'm never going to be allowed to see anything ever again.
Well, that is actually a very worrying thing. I mean, what very few people understand the way that Google is working and the way that Google's changing. We've done a lot of work into particularly how architects source products. And time and time again, we hear that they're actually Googling for this information to find some kind of window framing system or whatever. But they don't understand the algorithm that Google will have localized the search, and that they're actually finding local window companies and not this great Belgium massive firm. And it's a real worry. Yeah,
it's like that really annoying thing about LinkedIn, which is that if I link to Hugh Pearman, LinkedIn thinks that I would be really interested to know somebody else called Hugh Pearman. Have you noticed that? I mean, it's really annoying.
I hated other Hugh Pearmans.
Yeah.
I scorn them.
Anyway, I think, let's just talk amongst ourselves while we have a drink, shall we? But like any event, it needs great speakers, and I'd like to thank them very much. It also needs a great audience, and it's great that you've been so engaged. And let's have a drink.